The dungeon beneath Shadowpine Pack's great hall smelled of damp stone and forgotten blood. Elara pressed her back against the cold wall, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. 3 days had passed since Alpha Dominic threw her into this hole, and the darkness had begun to feel like a living thing, suffocating, patient, hungry. She could still hear his voice echoing through the pack bonds, thick with rage and humiliation. "You dare refuse me in front of the entire council? You, a lowborn Omega, reject your Alpha's command?" The crime had been simple. Dominic ordered her to kneel and apologize for speaking during a territorial dispute. She had suggested peaceful negotiation with the neighboring Riverbend pack instead of bloodshed. The other wolves had gasped at her audacity. An Omega speaking strategy to an Alpha was unthinkable, even if her words held merit. "I will not apologize for wisdom," she had said. Her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. The slap came swift and brutal, splitting her lip. Then the iron shackles, cold and unforgiving, around her wrists. The walk down stone stairs that seemed to descend into the earth's very heart. The door slamming shut, sealing her in absolute darkness. Now, as moonlight filtered through a crack in the ceiling far above, Elara traced the rough walls with her fingertips. She had refused to cry, refused to beg. Even as hunger gnawed at her stomach and thirst cracked her lips, she held on to the one thing Dominic could never take, her dignity. Footsteps echoed from above, heavy boots on stone accompanied by voices. "The Alpha King himself is here," someone whispered, awe thick in their tone. "Arrived an hour ago," unannounced. Dominic's practically pissing himself. Elara's wolf stirred for the first time in days, lifting its head with interest. The Alpha King, ruler of all packs in the Northern Territories, whose word was absolute law, whose presence could make even the cruelest Alpha bend the knee. The door at the top of the dungeon stairs groaned open. Torchlight spilled down, and Elara squinted against the sudden brightness. Multiple sets of footsteps descended, but one moved with a predatory grace that made her wolf whimper and preen simultaneously. "This is our dungeon, Your Majesty." Dominic's voice carried false confidence. "Nothing of interest down here, just storage, and I smell Omega blood." The voice that interrupted was deep, resonant, carrying the weight of mountains and ancient forests. "Fresh Omega blood. In a dungeon." Silence stretched taut as a bowstring. "A disciplinary matter, Your Majesty. The Omega overstepped her station and open every cell. Your Majesty, I assure you. Now." The command rippled with alpha dominance so profound that Elara heard wolves upstairs whimpering in submission. Keys jangled frantically, and cell doors began screeching open one by one. Most stood empty, harboring only rats and refuse. Then her door opened. Torchlight flooded her cell, and Elara raised her shackled hands to shield her eyes. Through her fingers, she saw him, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver eyes that seemed to glow with their own internal moonlight. His presence filled the small space like a storm barely contained in flesh. King Theron Nightshade, the most powerful Alpha in 5 generations, stared at her with an expression she could not read. "She defied a direct order," Dominic stammered from the doorway. "Pack law demands—" "Pack law," Theron's voice was deadly soft, "demands that an Alpha protect his pack members, not brutalize them for showing intelligence." He moved into the cell, and despite his overwhelming power, he approached Elara slowly, as one might approach a wounded animal. "What is your name?" "Elara Ashwood, Your Majesty." Her voice came out hoarse from disuse. "And what was your crime, Elara Ashwood?" She met his silver eyes. Refusing to look away despite every instinct screaming at her to submit to his dominance. "I suggested peace instead of war. I spoke without permission." Something flickered in his gaze, approval, perhaps, or recognition. He turned to the beta hovering in the doorway. "Remove her shackles." "Your Majesty, she is my pack member," Dominic protested. "You have no authority." Theron moved so fast that Elara barely tracked it. One moment he stood beside her, the next he had Dominic pinned against the stone wall, one hand around the smaller Alpha's throat. "I am king of the Northern Territories. Every wolf, every pack, every Alpha answers to me. Do not confuse my usual restraint with weakness." Dominic's face turned purple, his legs kicking uselessly. "When an Alpha abuses his power, when he punishes wisdom and rewards stupidity, When he cages those who would make his pack stronger, he ceases to deserve the title. Theron's voice carried throughout the dungeon, echoing up into the great hall above. You will release this Omega into my custody. Consider it payment for the insult you have offered the crown by your incompetence. He released Dominic, who collapsed, gasping. The Beta rushed forward with keys, fumbling at Ilara's shackles until they clattered to the floor. Her wrists were raw and bleeding where the iron had bitten deep. Theron's jaw tightened as he examined her injuries. Without a word, he removed his cloak, thick black fur lined with silver silk, and wrapped it around her shoulders. It smelled of pine and winter storms, and something indefinably male that made her wolf purr. Can you walk? Ilara nodded, pushing herself to her feet. Her legs shook, weak from days of sitting, but she forced herself to stand straight. She would not show weakness, not even before a king. Theron offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation she took it. They walked past Dominic, who watched with murderous rage, barely concealed behind a mask of submission. Up the stairs, into the great hall where the entire Shadowpine pack had gathered, drawn by the commotion. Whispers erupted as they emerged. The lowborn Omega, filthy and shackled just moments ago, now wore the Alpha King's own cloak and walked on his arm like a lady of the court. This pack has failed in its most basic duty, Theron announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. I am invoking ancient law. Ilara Ashwood is hereby removed from Shadowpine's registry and placed under royal protection. Any wolf who harms her answers to me personally. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Royal protection was sacred, absolute. It meant Ilara now held status above even high-ranking betas. Dominic stood at the dungeon entrance, trembling with rage and humiliation. You cannot simply take my pack members. Theron's smile was cold as winter frost. I am the king. I can do anything I deem necessary to maintain order and justice. He paused, letting his words sink in. Pray that I do not return to audit your other decisions, Alpha Dominic. I suspect I would find many more reasons to question your fitness to lead. Outside, a magnificent black carriage waited, pulled by horses that seemed too large, too aware to be entirely natural. Theron helped Ilara inside, and she sank into cushions softer than anything she had ever touched. As the carriage rolled forward, away from Shadowpine and everything she had ever known, Ilara finally allowed herself to tremble. Not from fear, but from the overwhelming reality of what had just happened. Through the window, she watched the Alpha King riding alongside on a massive black wolf, his shifted form, she realized. Even in beast shape, he radiated power and protection. For the first time in 3 days, Ilara felt safe. But as the moon rose full and heavy over the forest, she could not shake the feeling that her life had just changed in ways she could not yet comprehend. Chapter 2. The Silver Court. The royal palace rose from the mountainside like a crown of stone and starlight. Ilara pressed her face to the carriage window, watching torchlit towers pierce the night sky. She had heard stories of the capital, of course. What wolf hadn't? But reality dwarfed imagination. The carriage passed through gates guarded by warriors whose alpha auras made her wolf cower. These were the king's elite, chosen from every pack in the territory, loyal only to the crown. Their eyes tracked her passage with curiosity and something else, respect perhaps, for any wolf their king personally protected. Overwhelming, isn't it? Ilara startled. She had not heard the carriage door open, but Theron now sat across from her, returned to human form and dressed in formal black and silver. This close in the confined space, his presence was almost unbearable, power rolling off him in waves that made her skin prickle. I've never seen anything like it, Your Majesty. Theron. His silver eyes caught the passing torchlight. When we are alone, you may call me Theron. That wouldn't be appropriate, I am making it appropriate. A hint of amusement softened his stern features. You defied an alpha and spent 3 days in a dungeon, rather than submit to injustice. I think you can manage calling me by my name. The carriage stopped before a grand entrance where servants in royal livery waited. Theron exited first, then offered his hand. Ilara took it, acutely aware of her filthy dress and tangled hair, as she stepped into the gleaming marble foyer. A woman approached, Tall, elegant, with the bearing of high nobility, her eyes swept over Ilara with poorly concealed disdain. "Your Majesty, we were not informed you would be bringing guests." "Lady Cordelia." Theron's tone cooled noticeably. "This is Ilara Ashwood under royal protection. She requires chambers, clothing, food and medical attention for her injuries. See to it personally." "Of course, Your Majesty, but perhaps the servants' quarters would be more—" "The guest wing, east side overlooking the gardens." His voice held the weight of command. "And Cordelia? She is to be treated with the same respect you would show any noble guest. Am I clear?" Lady Cordelia's jaw tightened, but she bowed. "Crystal clear, Your Majesty." Theron turned to Ilara, and his expression softened again. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow we will discuss your future. You are safe here. That is a promise." He left through a different corridor, trailed by advisors who had materialized from shadows. Lady Cordelia's pleasant mask dropped the moment he disappeared. "This way," she said coldly, turning on her heel. Ilara followed through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate. Vast, ornate, filled with portraits of past kings and queens whose painted eyes judged all who passed. Other wolves moved through the halls, most dressed in fine silks and leather. They stared at Ilara, whispers following in her wake. Is that the Omega he pulled from Shadowpine? Disgraceful, really. What was he thinking? She must have seduced him somehow. Lady Cordelia stopped before an ornately carved door. "Your chambers. A servant will bring food and draw a bath. Try not to steal anything." She swept away before Ilara could respond. The room beyond was larger than the entire dwelling she had shared with 3 other Omegas, back at Shadowpine. A 4-poster bed dominated one wall, draped in silver and blue silk. Windows overlooked gardens illuminated by moonlight, where night-blooming flowers released their perfume into the cool air. Ilara sank onto a cushioned chair and finally allowed tears to come. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming rush of everything, fear, relief, confusion, and something else she dared not name. A knock interrupted her thoughts. A young servant entered, eyes kind despite her nervousness. "Miss Ashwood, I'm Clara. I'll be helping you tonight." Over the next hour, Clara drew a bath scented with lavender and moonflower, helped Ilara wash away 3 days of dungeon filth, and tended to her injured wrists with practiced gentleness. A simple but elegant dress appeared, soft grey wool that made Ilara's dark hair seem to shimmer. "You caused quite a stir," Clara whispered while braiding Ilara's hair. "The king hasn't invoked royal protection in years, and never for an Omega." "I don't understand why he helped me." Clara's reflection smiled in the mirror. "Maybe you reminded him of what justice looks like. The king is fair, but he's been surrounded by nobles playing power games for so long." She secured the braid. "You're like fresh air in a stuffy room." Food arrived, roasted meat, fresh bread, cheese, fruits Ilara had never seen. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, while Clara chattered about palace life. The servant's warmth helped ease the knot of anxiety in Ilara's chest. A sharp knock came at the door. Clara opened it to reveal a male beta with cold eyes. "The king requests Miss Ashwood's presence in the moon garden, immediately." Ilara's heart raced as she followed him through torch-lit corridors and out into the night. The moon garden was aptly named, designed to capture and reflect moonlight through strategically placed crystals and white stone pathways. At its center, beside a fountain carved to resemble wolves drinking from a stream, stood Theron. He had changed into simpler clothes, dark leather pants and a loose white shirt that revealed the strong column of his throat. Somehow, this made him seem more dangerous, not less. "You came," he said, as if surprised. "You commanded it." "I requested it. There's a difference." He gestured to a marble bench. "Sit with me?" They sat in silence for a moment, listening to water cascade over stone. The moon hung fat and luminous overhead, and Ilara felt its pull in her blood, the eternal call that defined their kind. "Do you know why I was at Shadowpine?" Theron asked finally. "I assumed inspection. Investigation. 3 packs filed complaints about Dominic's leadership, territory disputes he mishandled, alliances he broke, wolves he punished without cause. I came to observe him without warning. His jaw tightened. Finding you in that dungeon confirmed everything I suspected. He's a petty tyrant who mistakes cruelty for strength. What will happen to him? I've assigned an overseer to monitor his decisions. If he continues abusing his power, I'll remove him. Theron turned to face her fully. But I want to know about you, Ilara. You stood before an enraged Alpha and refused to submit, even knowing the consequences. Why? She met his gaze, that same defiance that had landed her in the dungeon burning bright again. Because he was wrong. War with Riverbend would have cost lives. Young wolves who never return, families torn apart, resources wasted. All because Dominic's pride was injured when their Alpha questioned his judgment. She shook her head. I couldn't stay silent while others suffered for one wolf's ego. Theron studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. You have something rare, Ilara. Not just courage, but wisdom combined with compassion. These halls are full of wolves with ambition and cunning, but few truly care about anything beyond their own advancement. Is that why you brought me here? To add another voice to your court? I brought you here because leaving you in that dungeon would have been unjust. He stood, moving to the fountain's edge. Moonlight painted silver highlights in his dark hair. But yes, I hope you'll stay. The court could benefit from your perspective. I'm an Omega from a minor pack. I have no title, no connections, no wealth. You have integrity. In this place, that's worth more than gold. He turned back to her, and something in his expression made her wolf keen with longing. Give me 1 month. Stay, observe, speak your mind as you did at Shadowpine. If after 30 days you wish to leave, I'll grant you land and resources to start fresh wherever you choose. Ilara considered. Return to what? Shadowpine would never accept her back, and few packs welcomed Omegas without family connections. Here, at least, she had the king's protection and a chance to influence decisions that affected thousands. 1 month, she agreed. Theron's smile transformed his face, making him seem younger, less burdened. Then tomorrow we begin. Sleep well, Ilara Ashwood. Your new life starts with the dawn. He walked her back to her chambers, and as she closed the door behind her, Ilara realized she felt something she had never experienced before. Hope. Chapter 3. Rising tide morning arrived with golden light streaming through Ilara's windows and Clara bringing fresh clothes. The king requests your presence at the morning council, the servant said, helping Ilara into a dress of deep blue that brought out the amber flecks in her brown eyes. Fair warning, the nobles aren't happy about it. The council chamber was exactly as intimidating as Ilara expected. A long table of polished oak dominated the space, surrounded by high-ranking wolves whose combined dominance made the air feel thick and heavy. Theron sat at the head, and an empty chair waited at his right hand. Conversations died as Ilara entered. Lady Cordelia's lips pursed with disapproval. A scarred beta named Marcus openly sneered. Only the king's steady gaze provided any sense of welcome. Lady Ashwood, Theron said formally, please join us. The title lady sent murmurs rippling around the table. Titles were earned through bloodline or achievement, not granted to rescued Omegas. Ilara took her seat, spine straight, refusing to show the fear churning in her stomach. Now that we're all assembled, Theron continued, Lord Marcus was presenting his proposal for the southern border dispute. Please continue. Marcus cleared his throat, shooting Ilara a resentful glance. As I was saying, the Ironwood Pact refuses to acknowledge our territorial claims. I propose we send a military force to remind them of the Crown's authority. And casualties? Theron asked. Acceptable losses for establishing dominance. Before Ilara could think better of it, words escaped her lips. What constitutes acceptable? 10 wolves, 20? And what of Ironwood's families? Are their losses acceptable too? The table went silent. Marcus's face flushed crimson. The Omega speaks out of turn. Lady Ashwood has been granted voice in this council, Theron said mildly. Continue, Ilara. She took a breath, committing fully now that retreat was impossible. Ironwood isn't refusing out of disrespect. Their territory has been their home for generations. Perhaps instead of threatening war, we could negotiate a boundary agreement that honors both their history and the Crown's authority. Negotiate! Marcus spat the word like poison. We are the royal court. We do not negotiate with lesser packs. The king negotiates, Elara countered, meeting his glare. That's what separates a wise ruler from a tyrant, knowing when strength means fighting and when it means finding better solutions. Lady Cordelia laughed, sharp and cutting. 3 days in the palace and the Omega fancies herself a political advisor. Your Majesty, this is absurd. Theron's expression remained neutral, but his eyes gleamed with something that might have been approval. Lord Marcus, draft a proposal for diplomatic negotiation with Ironwood. Lady Cordelia, you'll accompany him to ensure the terms are fair. We'll reconvene in 3 days. Marcus looked ready to argue, but one glance at the king's face silenced him. The council dissolved with wolves shooting hostile looks at Elara as they departed. Only Theron remained behind with her. That was bold. That was foolish, Elara corrected, her hands trembling now that the adrenaline faded. I made enemies. You made a difference. Marcus's plan would have resulted in bloodshed and gained nothing. Your suggestion might actually resolve the dispute. He moved closer, and the space between them felt charged. Do you know what I see when I look at you? She shook her head, not trusting her voice. Strength that doesn't require cruelty, wisdom that doesn't demand silence from others, the kind of leader this kingdom needs. His hand lifted, almost touching her cheek before he pulled back. The kind of queen... He stopped abruptly, jaw clenching. Forgive me. That was inappropriate. He left before she could respond, leaving Elara alone in the council chamber with her racing heart and the echo of words that changed everything. The days that followed fell into rhythm. Elara attended councils, offering perspectives that often clashed with noble opinion, but occasionally swayed Theron's decisions. She walked the gardens with Clara, learning palace politics and which wolves could be trusted. She studied in the vast library, devouring texts on law, history and governance, and always there was Theron. They took meals together, discussing everything from philosophy to pack dynamics. He showed her the training grounds where his warriors honed their skills, the archives where treaties dating back centuries gathered dust, the tower where he went when the weight of the crown grew too heavy. Why did you never take a mate? Elara asked one evening as they stood on the tower balcony, watching the moon rise over distant mountains. Theron was quiet for a long moment. I've met many she-wolves, beautiful, intelligent, powerful, but they all wanted the crown, not the wolf wearing it. They saw the king, never just. Me. That's lonely. It is. He turned to her, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her chest ache. Until recently, I had accepted that loneliness as the price of power. But lately, I find myself hoping for something different. The air between them hummed with unspoken feelings. Elara's wolf whined, urging her closer to this powerful alpha, who saw her as an equal rather than a subordinate. But fear held her back, fear of the future, of court politics, of wanting something that seemed impossibly beyond her reach. A sharp knock shattered the moment. A messenger burst onto the balcony, breathless. Your Majesty, Alpha Dominic has arrived, demanding an audience. He claims the Lady Ashwood is rightfully his pack member and must be returned. Theron's expression went cold and hard as winter stone. Then let us not keep him waiting. Chapter 4. The Moon's Judgment. The great hall buzzed with tension as wolves gathered to witness the confrontation. Dominic stood at its center, flanked by 6 of his strongest betas. He looked smaller than Elara remembered. His dominance diminished in the shadow of true power. Theron entered with Elara at his side and the crowd parted. The king moved like a predator stalking prey, controlled, dangerous, absolutely confident. Alpha Dominic, Theron's voice carried through the hall. You demanded an audience, speak. Dominic bowed, but his eyes burned with rage. Your Majesty, you took one of my pack members without formal transfer protocols. By ancient law, an alpha's claim on his pack supersedes even royal protection unless the wolf in question is proven to be in mortal danger. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. He was right, technically. The law was old, rarely invoked, but valid. 3 days in a dungeon without food or water, Elara said, her voice carrying clearly. Shackles that cut to bone. For the crime of offering strategic advice, I'd call that mortal danger. You defied a direct command, Dominic snarled, his composure cracking. An Omega questioning her Alpha's judgment in front of the entire council that demands punishment. And what punishment did your law dictate? Theron asked quietly, dangerously. Pack law allows for disciplinary measures at the Alpha's discretion. Discretion. Theron let the word hang in the air. An interesting concept. Tell me, Dominic, how many wolves have you caged in that dungeon over the past year? Dominic's confidence flickered. That's pack business. Answer the question. 7, maybe 8. For what offences? Various. Speaking out of turn, questioning decisions, failing to show proper respect. So you regularly imprison pack members for disagreeing with you. Theron descended the steps from his throne, each footfall echoing like a death knell, and you call this leadership. I call it maintaining order. You call it fear. Theron stopped 3 paces from Dominic. I've reviewed the complaints filed against you. Do you know what I found? A pattern of abuse disguised as discipline. Young wolves beaten for small mistakes. Families torn apart for political convenience. Resources hoarded while your pack struggles. Those are lies spread by jealous rivals. Are they? Theron pulled a scroll from his jacket. This is a petition signed by 63 members of your own pack, requesting my intervention. 63 wolves so desperate they risked your wrath to ask their king for help. The colour drained from Dominic's face. Around the hall, nobles watched with rapt attention. But none of that is why you're really here, is it? Theron continued. You don't care about pack law or protocols. You came because I humiliated you. Because a lowborn Omega is now more respected in my court than you'll ever be. Your pride is wounded, and you want revenge disguised as justice. I want what is mine. The words echoed through the hall, and Elara felt her wolf recoil, not from fear, but from the pure entitlement dripping from every syllable. She was never yours, Theron said softly. Elara Ashwood belongs to herself. That is the fundamental principle you fail to understand. Pack members are not possessions. They are wolves who choose to follow because they believe in their Alpha's vision and trust in their leadership. He turned to address the entire hall. I am invoking the right of challenge. As king, I claim Elara Ashwood not through force or ancient law, but through offering her something you never could, respect, safety, and the freedom to be herself without fear. Gasps erupted. The right of challenge was sacred, allowing wolves to choose between alphas when conflicting claims existed. Elara, Theron said, his silver eyes finding hers across the space. The choice is yours. Return to Shadowpine with Dominic, where silence is safety and subordination is survival, or remain here where your voice matters and your wisdom is valued. But understand, this must be your decision, made freely, without coercion. Every eye in the hall fixed on her. Dominic watched with barely contained fury. Lady Cordelia's expression remained carefully neutral, but her fingers drummed against her dress. She'd bet against Elara, clearly expecting her to fold under pressure. But Elara didn't see them. She saw only Theron, this powerful king who had descended into a dungeon to free a wolf he'd never met, who defended her before councils full of hostile nobles, who looked at her like she was precious rather than disposable. She saw the wolf who had changed her understanding of what strength meant. I choose to stay, Elara said, her voice steady and clear. I choose the king. Power erupted through the hall, not from Theron, but from the collective recognition of wolves acknowledging a bond forming. The ancient magic that governed their kind responded to truth spoken aloud. Elara had chosen her alpha. Dominic lunged forward with a roar, shifting mid-leap into his wolf form. His betas moved to follow, but Theron was faster. He met Dominic's charge with devastating force, catching the attacking wolf by the throat and slamming him to the marble floor hard enough to crack stone. Enough, Theron commanded, his alpha dominance washing over the hall like a tidal wave. Dominic's betas froze, unable to move against that overwhelming power. You came into my home, to my court, and attempted violence against a wolf under my protection. That is treason. Dominic shifted back, gasping. Theron's hand still locked around his throat. Mercy. Please. Mercy. Theron's laugh was bitter. Did you show mercy to Elara when she begged for water in that cell? Did you show mercy to the 63 wolves who signed that petition? He released Dominic, letting him crumple to the floor. But I am not you, so here is my judgment. Shadowpine Pack is hereby placed under direct royal oversight. You will retain your title, but every decision you make must be approved by my appointed overseer. Refuse, and I will strip your position and exile you to the wastelands. Dominic crawled backward, defeated and humiliated before every noble in the kingdom. His betas helped him stand, and together they retreated from the hall, leaving only echoes of their shame. Silence held for 3 heartbeats. Then the hall erupted in conversation, some scandalized, some approving, all buzzing with the drama they'd just witnessed. Theron turned to Elara, and despite the crowd, despite the weight of the crown and the formality of the moment, his expression softened with something achingly tender. You chose to stay. I chose you, she corrected, the truth of it settling into her bones like coming home. His hand lifted to her cheek, and this time he didn't pull away. The touch was gentle, reverent, full of promises too new to speak aloud. Then let me choose you too, not as king to subject, but as wolf to wolf. Around them, the court watched with varied expressions. Lady Cordelia's shock, Marcus's grudging respect, Clara's delighted grin from her position near the servants' entrance. But Elara barely noticed them. Under the light of the moon streaming through stained glass windows, surrounded by witnesses who would carry this story across the kingdom, the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories lowered his head to the Omega, who had defied injustice and chosen truth over safety. I, Theron Nightshade, King of the Northern Territories, claim you as my mate if you will have me. Not because you are perfect, but because you make me want to be better. Not because you are convenient, but because you are essential. Will you accept this bond? Tears blurred Elara's vision. A month ago she had been caged in darkness, hopeless and alone. Now she stood in a palace built of moonlight and stone, being asked to become a queen by the only wolf who had ever truly seen her. I accept, she whispered, then louder for all to hear. I accept. The bond snapped into place with the force of destiny finally fulfilled. Bright, fierce, unbreakable. Elara gasped as his emotions flooded through the connection. Protectiveness, devotion, hope, and a love so profound it made her knees weak. Theron caught her as she swayed, pulling her close. I have you, he murmured against her hair. I will always have you. The court erupted in applause, some genuine, some obligatory, but the sound filled the hall like thunder. Clara was crying happy tears. Even Lord Marcus managed a respectful nod, recognizing that their king had found not just a mate, but an equal. Later, as the moon rose to its apex and celebrations echoed through the palace, Theron and Elara stood again in the moon garden where this had begun. The fountain sang its endless song, and night-blooming flowers released their perfume to the stars. I was so afraid in that dungeon, Elara admitted, her head resting against his chest. Not of dying, but of disappearing, of being forgotten like I never mattered. You matter, Theron said fiercely. You matter to me, to this kingdom, to every wolf who will benefit from the changes your presence inspires. His arms tightened around her. I came to Shadowpine expecting to find a tyrant. Instead, I found you, the one wolf in all the territories brave enough to speak truth regardless of consequence. You changed everything. We changed everything, she corrected, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. You freed me, but I think maybe I freed you too. From loneliness, from isolation, from the belief that being king meant being alone. His kiss was soft and sweet, full of promises and new beginnings. When they finally parted, both were breathless and smiling. Above them the moon shone full and luminous, blessing this union between a king who had descended into darkness to find light, and an Omega who had defied injustice and found her destiny. In the weeks and months that followed, Elara's influence spread through the court like dawn breaking over mountains. Her compassion tempered justice with mercy. Her wisdom prevented wars and forged alliances, and her presence beside the king reminded all wolves that true strength lay not in domination, but in lifting others higher. Some nobles never accepted her, but their opinions mattered less than the love of the common wolves, who saw in their new queen proof that courage and integrity could triumph over circumstance and birth. And when travelers asked how a low-born Omega became queen of the Northern Territories, the story always began the same way. She was locked in a dungeon for defying an Alpha, until the Alpha King freed her with one command. But what freed him was her choosing to stay.